Hi, this is the History of Israel podcast, an Each My Own Beat podcast. Over the coming weeks, months, and years, we'll be discussing the history of Israel. This is not a podcast to say which side is right, which side is wrong. It's not a podcast to talk about the war which is happening in Palestine. It's just simply the history of Israel. This is the History of Israel podcast, episode 28, Period History of the Late Antiquity. The Roman Empire underwent considerable social, cultural, organizational changes, starting with the reign of Diocletian, who began the custom of splitting the empire into eastern and western portions ruled by multiple emperors simultaneously. The Sassanian Empire supplanted the Parthian Empire and began a new phase of Roman-Persian wars, the Roman Sassanian Wars. The divisions between the Greek East and Latin West became more pronounced. The Diocletian persecution of the Christians in the early 4th century was ended by Galerius, and under the Constantine the Great, Christianity was made legal in the empire. The 4th century Christianization of the Roman Empire was extended by the conversions of Tirates the Great of Armenia, Marian III of Iberia, and Exana of Axium, who later invaded and ended the kingdom of Kush. During the late 4th century reign of Theodosius I, Nicene Christianity was proclaimed the state church of the Roman Empire. The city of Constantinople became the permanent imperial residence in the East by the 5th century and superseded Rome as the largest city in the late Roman Empire and the Mediterranean basin. The longest Roman aqueduct system, the 250-kilometer Aqueduct of Valens, was constructed to supply water, and the tallest Roman triumphal columns were erected there. Migrations of Germanic, Hunnic, and Slavic tribes disrupted the rule from the late 4th century onwards, culminating first in the sack of Rome by the Visigoths in 410 and subsequent sack of Rome by the Vandals in 455, part of the eventual collapse of the empire in the West itself by 476. The Western Empire was replaced by the so-called barbarian kingdoms, with the Arian Christian Ostrogothic kingdom ruling the Rome from Ravenna. The resultant cultural fusion of Greco-Roman, Germanic, and Christian traditions formed the foundations of the subsequent culture of Europe. In the 6th century, Roman imperial rule continued in the East, and the Byzantine-Sassanian Wars continued. The campaigns of Justinian the Great led to the fall of Ostrogothic and Vandal kingdoms and their reincorporation into Europe, or reincorporation into the empire, my apologies, when the city of Rome and much of Italy and North Africa returned to imperial control. Though most of the Italy was soon part of the kingdom of the Lombards, Roman Exarchate of Ravenna endured, ensuing the so-called Byzantine papacy. Justinian constructed the Hagia Sophia, a great example of Byzantine architecture, and the first outbreak of centuries-long first plague pandemic took place. At Ctesiphon, the Sassanans completed the Tak Kasara, the colossal iwan of which was the largest single-span vault of unreinforced brickwork in the world, and the triumph of Sassanian architecture. The middle of the 6th century was characterized by the extreme climate events, the volcanic winter of 535 to 536, and the late Antiquity Little Ice Age, and the disastrous pandemic, the plague of Justinian in 541. The effects of these events in social and political life are still under discussion. In the 7th century, the disastrous Byzantine-Sassanid War of 602 to 628, the campaigns of Khosrow II and Heraclius facilitated the emergence of Islam and the Arabian Peninsula during the lifetime of Muhammad. Subsequent Muslim conquest of the Levant and Persia overthrew the Sassanian Empire and permanently wrested 2/3 of the Eastern Roman Empire's territory from Roman control, forming the Rashidun Caliphate. The Byzantine Empire, under the Heraclian dynasty, began the Middle Byzantine period, and together with the establishment of the later 7th century of the Umayyad Caliphate generally marks the end of the Late Antiquity.
This has been the History of Israel podcast. Check back every Wednesday for new episodes. We're available on Apple, iTunes, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. We also have each episode streaming on YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. We're available on eattomyownbeat.com as well as the History of Israel podcast on Facebook.